Hello everyone. Hope you're doing well. Welcome to another Tech Circus event. Very excited to see you today. On the right-hand side, you should see the chat function on the right there. Feel free to use it there. On the top right is the Q&As as well. If you can drop any questions you might like to ask our panelists in the session today in that location. Excited to see you. So we're here today to talk about smart cities and what the future might hold in that area. We've got the fabulous Tatiana here, who's going to be co-hosting. We've got Renato de Castro, and we've got Priya Prakash. Don't forget, later in this month, we also have our Defi event coming up on the 27th and 28th of April. So excited to welcome you there. Keep an eye out on your emails for that. Don't forget also, this session is being recorded. So later on, you'll also get an email about being able to watch this should you not be able to stay for it all or share it with some of your friends. You'll be able to do that from the Tech Circus YouTube account. Now, with that being said, I'm going to welcome our speakers back to the stage. It seems to have changed everything up again on us, which is always good fun. Hello, Tatiana there.
Hello there. Good evening.
So yes, AirMeet's playing up again, but it's all good. We figured out workaround there on the fly. So sorry about that. If I was a little bit preoccupied there, that was all good. So down at the bottom there, also in the audience, you've got your reactions. You can use your emojis if something's coming up or resonates with you in the audience. Do use it so you know the speakers vibes with you something. With that being said, Tatiana, I'll let you do the formal introductions and I'll disappear backstage. Should you need me, I'm around, all right? So with that being said, have some fun.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tatiana, and I'm from Tallinn, Estonia. I'm the founder of Clean Tech, Deep Tech startup, and I've been for a very long time interested in the concept of smart cities, and I'm very happy to moderate such an outstanding panel with people who have been in this space and who have literally, I might be incorrect if I say decades of experience, at least like combined for sure. I would want you to introduce yourself so that our participants know a bit more about us.
Okay, Priya goes first. So
sure, Renato. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. This is interesting. I was saying like a retro topic about it always comes back in fashion. What makes a city smart? I'm Priya Prakash, founder of Design for Social Change. It's an urban tech R&D studio. Been focusing on people-centered, smart cities for some time since 2012. And we've really kind of moved towards from looking at everything from standards, IoT data. We've moved a lot more towards working with governments and companies looking at digital transformation in the climate tech space. So still focusing very much in the city and urban systems, but working with large organizations and entities on how you could really focus on climate, working with nature. So that's our focus area.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tatiana. Thank you, Priya. So hello, everyone. Renato de Castro. I am speaking today directly from Dubai. I'm the executive director at RMA Advisory company. We are a pure play smart city advisory firm. And yeah, as Tatiana already said, some decades on smart cities. I used to joke with some colleagues that we are part of the dinosaurs from the smart city concept of smart city experts. And I've been here in the market already 1 year. It's the 9th country I live abroad, always working directly for governments on developing smarter cities. So I think that we can start exactly from this point. I don't believe that we have smart cities. I think that cities can become smarter, but cities are ecosystems, right? Dynamic ecosystems. So there is no dumb city as well that no smart city. So it's a journey. Smart city is not a final destination. It's a journey that never ends. So yeah, how to make cities smarter? That could be the question.
So yeah, that was my first question. How do you define a smart city? What makes cities smart? And when we can actually call that like city smart?
So I start from me, Priya, then I give to you, and it's just to be. I mean, we have no gender balance, right? No, I'm the minority today here. So actually, I have a quote on smart cities. So I have just published my second book on the topic, and I'm still not feeling comfortable to have a technical definition for smart cities. Again, it's very dynamic. And working for governments, this is exactly the first question. Do you think I have a smart city here? And my answer for mayors and city officers are always the same. Ask your citizens, right? I mean, it's much more about a feeling, perception, harder than what you deliver. So for me, smart cities are places that everything seems to conspire to make your life better. This was exactly how I felt when I was in Singapore. And by chance, Singapore is one of the top ranked smart cities in the world. So I think citizens doesn't need to understand about technology. They just need to have this feeling that life is better now than it was before. And deep belief that this is a continuous process that is just getting better. So smart city is about quality of life. And that's for me, it's a smart city, you know.
Priya, and what is your vision on smart cities?
To be honest, talking about being in this business for a couple of years, we already spoke about dinosaurs and stuff. I started in a very naive entrepreneurial way of setting up something called Changifier platform. And I, as a cyclist in London, had an accident and I wanted to fix the streets outside my house. It was extremely naive and stupid in retrospect, because I thought somehow I could take on the London city authorities and somehow fix the potholes. And I realized doing that as an entrepreneur itself was quite hard. And then making the citizen and giving them the tools also. It's not about consuming or like coming together and making things better. It's the whole combination, like Renato talks about, working with the government, working with different organizations. And sometimes I feel smart city is almost like it can be a utopian vision. We would all aspire, like having cities conspire to make lives easier for citizens. I think ultimately it's about almost like when you have a garden and you're trying to grow your plants and fruits, it's about creating the right conditions for that garden to thrive. So I think smart city is unfinished business. You can create the right conditions for people's intelligence, for those technologies, for those policies, for the weather, climate, all of those things coming together and conspiring together, like Renato says, to create the best situation. But I think we need to be better gardeners for that. So smart cities is not about instrumentation and IoT or just about citizen-led or about the policy. It's a combination of creating the ecosystems and bringing that together. And in retrospect, I wish somebody had told me that as an entrepreneur, because I was quite naive when I first started in this business.
What do you see as main obstacles right now for cities to becoming smart, and what would be the fastest solutions that would help to deal with those obstacles?
Wow.
Yeah, good question. Good question. We are this new book, we have just released a new concept called Thenero. This is part of my research on smart cities that started with the city startup that is thinking as a startup, but applying these to city management. And there was some premises on this, but what we discovered after the COVID, and I was working for the Italian government during COVID, is that the way we were dealing with smart city projects in cities were basically in a matrix, right? We had the city pillars: education, health, sanitation, and go on, and then we have solutions. And so actually we were considering that to have a matrix, we need to have some numbers or some aspects that doesn't change. And what happened with the COVID was exactly, we changed completely the basis for the matrix. Example, thinking about solutions for education, we never considered the possibility that kids could not go to school. So we are just in the matrix, we are just taking consideration the journey of a student, waking up, need the uniform, breakfast, go to school. We need devices on the classroom. We need the teachers being trained and so on. COVID changed completely this. So we believe that smart cities should be taken as a neuro system, not as a matrix. What happened was exactly this. Even without any control of what was happening, even without any resilience plan, cities survived, and the ecosystem itself found new solutions. And so, for example, Zoom platform during COVID was more valuable than all the 7 largest air companies combined. Why? Because it was a solution that the ecosystem took as a part of the process, you know. So we really believe that cities behave as the brain in a neural way, that when you get one connection cut in your brain, the system will find other connections and you still perform. So yeah, cities, so that is the change of mindset was always, we always understood that smart city was a change in the society mindset, but now we see that we really need to take this in a neural way, not just in a normal matrix or 0-1 binary way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Sorry.
Priya.
Tatiana, if I can just re-articulate your question. Your question was basically, what is a smart city and how is the smart city actually? I'm just trying to recollect the question.
No.
The
My
obstacles to do
question
smart city.
was about the obstacles. So what are the obstacles right now for us to reach actually the concept of smart cities?
Yeah.
And I can see that we have one more panelist joining.
Aisha is joining
Have you
in.
on board? If you can hear us, if you can please introduce yourself, and then we would be very happy to have you with us on the conversation.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes. We cannot see you, Aisha.
Yes, I'm trying to join.
The camera icon.
Yeah, there is a camera icon on the bar. We all had the same problem. It's very,
you did?
Yes. It's,
there you
see?
go.
Yeah, everybody. It's really a shame, but it's just the camera button. Yeah.
Thank you so much, and my apologizing for being late. How are you?
Very fine, thank you. Welcome.
So everyone, hello. I'm Ayesha Khanna, and I'm based in Singapore. I run Addo AI, which is an AI services firm, and we do quite a lot of work with cities, looking at how to run cities more efficiently, and especially in the area of healthcare and citizen services.
Thank you so much. So my latest question was about obstacles. So what are the obstacles to be able to actually reach the concept of smart city? And then what would be the fastest way to overcome them? Priya was answering the question halfway.
I'd love Ayesha to join up. This would be great. Let's put her on a spot.
Okay, then go ahead.
Do you want me to answer? Well, look, there are a couple of obstacles. One of the obstacles is the inability for people to actually have the right talent in place to plan a human-centric smart city. So a lot of companies or governments can tend to think that it is very much about the technology, but oftentimes they get stuck when they start a project. And the reason is either the project is not adopted at all because it is not, it's not user-friendly to the citizens. It is dependent on interagency data and systems integration, which again, because they did not take that into account, fails, or simply because they are working with people who, or they themselves are not equipped to make a large city scale project work. And so my PhD, for example, was on how to pilot such smart city projects, for example, in transportation. So I think that's kind of the biggest obstacle in my experience. Otherwise, at this stage, you know, the technology and the information has reached a point, and there's so many good examples in the world, that if you do it in a manner that is accessible to everyone, that takes into account the messiness that is natural to the city and accommodates that, and also is prototyped and scaled slowly, you should be able to experiment and be able to come up with something that's useful.
Thank you so much. That's a very interesting point of view. But Priya, what do you think?
Yeah. I was going to add to Renato and Aisha's point, you know, there's definitely human-centric and designing at scale. I think one thing that we seem to see more and more often, and this is me putting my designer hat on, is cultures of use. So it's a bit like, we saw a lot of experiments in China as well, where they built cities. If you build something, you think people will come, and they're like ghost cities, and everything is working, everything is set up, and there's tumbleweed through the streets. And then you go to messy cities and you see there's not much infrastructure, but people actually want to hang out there. And I think that the challenge we have, they say like, culture kills strategy for breakfast. So I think the problem is similar in smart cities, is even though we have all these good intentions and we want to improve citizens' lives and we want to really create an amazing social equity for communities, we somehow seem to, it's almost like a chef in the kitchen not getting those right ingredients and the right spice to make a dish palatable and tasty. So even though we have all of these ingredients, we're unable to bring that cultural magic in the end. And I'm very curious to hear from Renato for Dubai's experiment, because there are different cities where they have put those building blocks and foundational elements in place. And then there is a natural kind of cohesion coming from the people and the culture itself, which then makes it take off. And that's what becomes kind of almost going back to the gardener aspect I said. You can create the right ingredients and the right conditions, and then you expect people to kind of adopt it and make it part of their everyday behavior, use those new citizen services, use those smart city kind of traffic systems, and not necessarily think the government is watching you. They also give benefit of doubt and want the government to help them. So because there's a lot of things about privacy and data. So I think it's really interesting when people have the appetite for risk as citizens, as government, as organizations to adopt this. And then you start seeing that behavior change and the cultural kind of take off. So I think culture is a missing ingredient, and that definitely is an obstacle.
Now that you've touched a bit upon innovation, how do you think smart cities fit into the concept of metaverse, or it's still two completely different concepts? And then can we actually use the term of, let's say, digital twins, digital cities, or it's something that's not going to be reached in reality anytime soon? Renato, we cannot hear you. You're muted.
Basic, yeah. It's even not fair to have Aisha with us, because the first digital twin project for cities was exactly Singapore back 2016. And I think that metaverse is just let's say, to be very, very simple and to understand, metaverse is a digital layer that we can add to we should add to the physical world that can help us to achieve better quality of life or whatever when you talk about smart cities. Yes, I think that it's totally connected, and we have already seen some nice projects that we are governments are start looking for these and started putting the first flags on the metaverse, and understanding that citizens are somehow already there. We have all these users and players and gamers and so on in different metaverse, as you know. So yeah, I really think that fits and it's totally connected. And some metaverse are already being built exactly to be digital twin environments. NVIDIA, for example, has the Omniverse. They have already some, for example, some factories inside there that they are performing digital twin strategies to make better the performance of their operations. The same thing can be done for cities. I totally agree. And just to wrap my last answer is exactly this. Again, smart cities are not just single projects put it together. You need to have a strategy. Without a strategy, we are going to be piloting and trying to get answers on technology, and it's not this. It's about people, as Priya said. It's about life quality improvement. So I think metaverse will help us a lot to have this big picture that we lost somehow when you think cities as pillars only.
Thank you so much. Priya, what is your opinion?
Well, I think, we've just shifted the problem from smart city to metaverse, and we haven't asked the fundamental questions of why, why smart city, why metaverse? And I think this is why it's great coming back into this conversation and panel, because I think until we understand why, it's kind of, we can keep creating these new formats, right? They're all they're formats. And the thing is, it's easy to kind of focus on the technology, the metaverse and the whole kind of Web3 technologies. We had the similar thing in smart cities. And I don't want to sound grumpy, but I think the fundamental problem we have is we haven't managed to figure out what makes people happy, in whether they're in a city, whether they're in a metaverse, and how much attention they're going to spend in front of a screen, constantly, like with all these kind of notifications and things coming there. And it's ultimately, we got to understand the purpose for these things. And if you don't understand and crack that purpose, and the government will do that by saying citizens have to be happy, you have to improve health, what we saw in pandemic, you have to improve like governance, which we've seen in different countries going through lots of social political problems. But I think from an individual perspective, unless it kind of impacts them on a day-to-day level and really brings some kind of meaning, it's very hard to see the value of these things. And maybe I'm going to be that grumpy old git and say, oh, I'm sure this metaverse is going to be amazing, and I'll put my virtual goggles on, I'll drink the Kool-Aid like I drank the smart city Kool-Aid as well years ago. But I think fundamentally we need to have a purpose and a meaning for these things to make an impact in their lives. So I'm happy to be challenged in the panel here, and somebody can convert me into a metaverse fan. But right now, I'm not even a smart city fan, so still catching up.
Thank you. Aisha, what is your opinion?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. In technology, we are always trying to solve problems, and innovation is essentially solving a problem and bringing value at scale to the masses. Now, there are 3.2 billion gamers in the world, 70% of South Korea games. And that doesn't mean they wear like VR goggles and game, but they're on mobile, they're used to that kind of environment. They spend quite a lot of time there. Aside from the fact whether it's good for us to be spending so much time digitally or not, the fact is that we will have more work, more entertainment, and more socializing online. And so if you look at our online to offline and offline to online world, if that's getting blurry, then I should be able to have an app that can automatically have a single sign-on and give me access to all government services. Maybe I should be able to walk across to a hyper-local government agency that can, one little room can give me all the services I need instead of going through the bureaucratic and inefficient process of going to many of them. Or if I'm in a virtual environment, I should be able to take my avatar and go there. Now, if people find that useful, they will use it. And if they use it and there's measurably, they spend less time dealing with bureaucracy and more time getting what they need, then that is something that makes their lives better and enables them to achieve their own potential in terms of meaningful work and meaningful interactions outside dealing with the government. So I think that it is for that purpose, for those people who are spending more time for their ease of convenience, that it would be interesting for them, which is why some governments, like the South Korean government, have decided to put an agency in the metaverse by next year. And I think that is something to consider. But overall, the job is not to throw technology at the problem, but to solve problems.
Now I've taken you a bit, to the future with this question, but now I want to take you to the past and ask if we have enough of, hardware, solid infrastructure to actually implement all the software concepts. Is it even possible? There is no point in bringing metaverse to areas where there is no even internet connection. How do we see that? How do we work with that if we're talking about the concept of smart cities?
Well, when we developed the concept of the Thenero that I mentioned before, we divided the strategy in 6 layers. That is a sequence that should be sought before starting a project on a smart city. First layer is the DNA, and Priya already reached this. Culture, and cities doesn't want a new city, just want a better city. They are very proud, and if we call these sense of belonging. So that we can really get them engaged. So DNA of the city is very important. The second one, it's dividing the city in these dimensions that we call the smart city dimensions, very traditional European concept: smart people, smart living, smart government, economy, environment, and mobility. And the third one, before deciding or starting discussing about projects, is exactly these we call the foundational technologies. So we have three technologies that should be in cities and should be discussed as let's say priority investments before discussing smart cities. Hyperconnectivity, as you said, without connectivity, we don't have any layer of high technology, artificial intelligence, IoT, you name it. So we cannot have without connectivity. Then we need to have distributed infrastructure. Now we are talking not only about physical infrastructure, that we need hardware and data centers and data lakes, but also the cloud capacity and the way you manage these as government and or as city infrastructure. And the last one is computing power. We are just to shift to another age of computing, that is the quantum computing, and we still see cities that are working with no computer powering. So we cannot empower smart city projects if you don't have these three basic technology layer before discussing about projects, use cases, and even pillars. So yeah, I think that this is a homework to be done when you're structuring basic projects on smart cities.
Thank you. Anyone else wants to speak on this question, or I can jump to another question that I'm very excited about?
Let's go with your excitement, Thenero.
In your opinion, does smart city concept should include any environmental aspects? Should smart cities be carbon neutral? Should they have any special programs to be environmentally friendly?
I mean, that's absolutely. I mean, given where we are today, it would be, first of all, if you look at putting on my smart city BSI author hat on, you wouldn't call something smart city if it's not sustainable. And sustainable has to come across everything from what Renato said, the infrastructure layer, to see how you kind of scale and run a smart city, to the energy it consumes and how it sits with the environment. And environment is everything from nature, people, all the different kind of sentient beings as well. So you have to work with your environment. And I think this is where a lot of older smart cities got it wrong, which was all defining it purely on instrumentation and technology, and wasn't really considering how it would work with nature and work with communities. So, if you think about Smart Cities 1.0, which was very much about instrumentation and IoT and hardware-driven and software-driven solutions, then we went to Smart City 2.0, which was about, okay, let's incorporate people and governance and communities. And Smart City 3.0, with the climate challenges that we have, is very much about, okay, how do we work with nature and work with carbon, neutral and carbon removal technologies as well. So I think it's very much working with the trajectory of where we are as a society and what the challenges are that we face as cities. And that's why we cannot not have a smart city that doesn't work with the environment now, because it won't survive.
Thank you. Aisha, do you have anything to add?
No, I think this is a no-brainer. Absolutely. You cannot justifiably set up any city in the world which is not resilient to the kind of catastrophes that we're facing or going to face, and also that is not making amends to the damage that we're doing to Earth. And I think that is the kind of values that we have in smart cities as well. So we've discussed a lot of the human centricity, we've discussed the tech stack, we've discussed kind of cultural adoption, but now it's values as well. I think that are really important. What are the values, whether it is related to data, whether it is related to the amount of time people spend online, whether it is related to how sustainable it is. And for example, some of the new townships coming up in Singapore are completely pedestrian friendly and completely vehicle free with only some autonomous vehicles. So that's a decision you take, right? When you say that in 30 years, we're going to make a real effort to become green as a country and as a city. So I think these are the kinds of things where you make a decision, you have values, those values are communicated to your citizens. That's very important. If you want to use robots, for example, but you don't communicate that for efficiency's sake, for example. So in New York, they wanted to use Boston Dynamics robot dogs to help defuse bombs. But there was a huge outcry amongst New Yorkers, and that whole process had to be stopped because New Yorkers thought the robot dog was going to carry a gun and act as a police dog. And later on in Wired magazine, the police department alluded that it had not communicated properly. So if you don't communicate when you use technologies, if you don't communicate your values and get buy-in from your citizens, then what are you, a dictatorship? Like that's not a smart city at all. So I think that this is a great question and alludes to a much bigger set of values that we must decide on together as a society or as a city, and then make sure everybody understands them.
Thank you. As we know, let's say there are some governments that have implemented quite a high level of technological development within their cities. But I completely agree with you on the point that it's also the security that you feel within the city. So considering all the information we know about all the countries, which governments do you think will be able to implement the concept of smart cities fast and basically grow it from city to city, not just have like one example city within the country, but let's say be able to actually scale the model throughout the country?
So I'm just back from India and I feel quite bullish about the implementation. There was a lot of policy and song and dance about implementing this, I think it was 200 or 300 smart cities in India, and that was a while back. And then seeing how the money went, and after a couple of years, looking at the cities that have transformed themselves and what services citizens have adopted, especially during the pandemic, and seeing how it becomes part of the fabric of business as usual. I feel there is a hybrid model, which is you can run something as a pilot. You can also have it as a top-down centralized model coming from the city, but then you have like the ecosystem, which is coming from the people, the developers, local organizations, which take that model and start doing it on a hyper-local level. And I think what I've seen in what's happening within India is really heartening. And I believe it's definitely somewhere between that hybridness of things which are earlier set up and then people making it theirs in their own way, using Jugaad and using local resources.
Yeah, it's very new project. Right? It's 2016, I think, is Smart Nation. I was in India when they launched the project. I was working with the government for IIT, and yes, and there is I mean, it's really complicated to implement smart city strategies in a multi-stakeholder, let's say, level in democratic countries, because a lot of forces that are not pushing to the same direction, and then it's much easier in countries that are more centralized. So, for example, here in Dubai, I really see a lot of. I like the city. I see the projects start and grows very fast and are implemented, but it's still missing sometimes these multi-stakeholder concept and also the sense of belongings from the citizens. When I was working for local government here, I was pushing on the term citizens, and they said, look, but how about the residents? I said, what's the difference? And so and here we have 9 foreigners for 1 local, so there is a big issue of this sense of belongings. But I would say that a lot of effort has been put here in the Middle East. I'm following some projects now in Saudi Arabia. Same issue. It's a greenfield project, a lot of money, a lot of centralized decision. So you see all the projects growing very fast, but then to turn asphalt, concrete, and glass into a smart city, it's another big challenge to create a DNA for these new cities. So I see a lot of things will be done here, and it's happening, But just to finalize, I think that a very good example of smart city development in a national level that also related to a change of mindset, it's the Netherlands. So Amsterdam, they used to pilot a lot of projects there, and most part of the successful pilot projects became really national. So it's but again, small society, small country, a lot of money, a lot of sense of social development. So makes things easier,
I know. I mean, I'm coming from Estonia, and as you know, we have the most advanced e-governance system in the world. But it's very easy to implement when you have just 1 million people for the whole country.
Exactly. Singapore. I mean, before you arrive, Aisha, I said my concept of smart city, my definition, my romanticized definition, and it was coined in Singapore. I think Singapore, you feel that everything conspires to make your life better. Solutions pop up. It's you have a problem, and the problems are already solved. Somehow. So, but again, it's a city state, right? Easier, centralized city state, so easier to make it happen.
I mean, I think one of the interesting things is that there is Smart City 2.0 is far less dependent on the government than it was before. So you basically have, exactly as Priya was saying, also you have this ecosystem of players. As long as you have basic things like infrastructure, whether it is telecommunications infrastructure or even a national identity system that allows KYC, this allows you to create the foundation for many, many, many companies to come in and build telemedicine, transportation, health, education. And the job of the government then becomes both for that foundational infrastructure and the governance of it in terms of protecting the citizens and their data, their services, making sure that there is for-profit seeking, nothing untoward is done that manipulates the citizens. And that means that you have very different, as Renato was saying, you have very different kinds of cities. There's a continuum. There are small, centralized, well-run cities, and then there are very large emerging market cities that are still doing well because of the mobile phone, because of identity databases, and they are able to also roll out and leapfrog over some of the others who have very good healthcare. If you have, and it's not just software, right? It's hardware as well. You get something like Butterfly Q, which is a handheld ultrasound, which was also funded by the Gates Foundation. And now you don't need fabulous hospitals that are extremely high tech, like in some of these small cities, but you can have somebody, a nurse's assistant, kind of go on a cycle and see if a mom's embryo is okay. And there's an even AI in the ultrasound itself that can give some kind of analysis, and then you can reach out to a doctor if there's a problem. These is the kind of jugaad or kind of innovation that you see, which is based on innovation essentially in software and hardware with AI and shrinking hardware. So I think it's super exciting. I think that digital divide between smart cities, as long as you get the foundational infrastructure right, doesn't have to be there. And thank God for that, because it's so terribly unfair that you have some amazing high-tech cities and the rest of the world faces the injustice just because they are not rich enough to not have good services.
But how can we create collaboration models that work for hybrid smart cities, for Metaverse, for more AI implementation, and everything in between? Maybe Priya, maybe you can start with this question.
Yeah, sorry, I was the one who kind of suggested it, so I can happy to telling back. So happy to take that on. I was very interested to also start this conversation also with people in the chat with some really interesting ideas around the NFTs and crypto, because we haven't spoken about blockchain and we haven't spoken about DAOs. There's a whole governance kind of renaissance happening, which, and Renato spoke about centralized systems. Aisha has also touched upon things like, how you need to have this distributed models. And what we're really seeing is from an infrastructure layer, from a governance layer, we're seeing a renaissance of different system models. So traditionally, you would have this kind of centralized model with a matrix organization. Now we have, then following the kind of Arab Spring, we have the decentralized model. And now, you have with the whole kind of Web3 blockchain, you have this kind of completely different models where you don't even need government to kind of create governance and create your own communities and fan communities around topics which you're passionate about. So I think what we see is ultimately it's about, like, going back to the topic of creating the right conditions for collaboration. It's like, if we can understand what those ingredients are, and we can create the barrier for entry lower for communities to adopt these technologies. And Estonia is a great example, Singapore is a great example, but in communities where literacy probably is not so high, but they have, indigenous communities have wonderful collaboration models, which have been happening through centuries. So we don't need another kind of software to do that. You have that through human communication and human interaction. So I think we seem to somehow be in this really interesting opportunity where we can take those ideas that we had started when we were, naive and wide-eyed about smart cities and having communities leading, and bringing that along with the blockchain, the DAOs, or the Web3 technologies, and looking at the ancient wisdom we have from the indigenous communities and creating a hybrid model. And maybe I've drunk the Kool-Aid, but I really feel this is missing right now, is taking the ancient wisdom along with the new technologies and bringing that in the kind of social space with the challenges we have, because then we are really plugging the gap between the old and the ancient and the new and the exciting. And there's a great comment in the chat about the number of gamers in, around the world. So people are already using Discord. You have Discord communities. We have seen so many communities come across during the pandemic. So what if we actually took all of this energy and found ways in which we can bring that into cities, not just when there's a pandemic or not just when there is a war, but actually business as usual, because we will have to get more resilient as a society. Sorry, I felt like I didn't answer the question at all. I was just going off bit on that.
No. I think that you answer. Yeah, I mean, I think that the point is exactly this. We need to empower people, empower citizens to become the main stakeholder in the process, and then we have everything smoothly. So yeah, I also like the example you gave in the chat. I mean, what make these what so-called metaverses very powerful is that people that are there, they are concentrated because they have a sense of belonging. They belong to the same group, and that's why Facebook is failing to create their metaverse, because there is no sense of belonging. It's just social network for nothing, right? So I think that for smart cities and for projects to be successful and to reach this level is exactly this. We need to and what you did, Priya, there with it doesn't matter if it was naive in the beginning, but it was so focusing a problem and putting together people that has the same sense of being part of a bigger group. And I totally believe the solution will come through this, and technology will enable, will help us to see this. Go to the central land. They already have their own governance and their own. You can even vote for the way you think that these metaverse should be developed and the space should be shared. So I deeply believe it's a process. It's a journey. What pandemic brought us was exactly this acceleration, but we were already in this direction.
And that's exactly what I wanted to ask. So considering all the latest events, pandemic, and then, for example, now war in Ukraine, when they are already talking that when they will be rebuilding the cities, they will be using completely different concepts, from placing the schools and roads and everything. So what can we learn from pandemic and war, and how we should implement and build smart cities in the first place?
I mean, one of the things that people are talking about are hyper-local cities, or cities within cities, so that they are much more resilient. So the first thing is, how are you much more resilient, whether it comes to having satellite networks for your internet connectivity, or being able to get everything you need within 15 minutes, the concept of having everything from your preschool to your groceries to your digitally integrated home that can convert into an office or a gym. And, whether it is a war or whether it is a pandemic, or how can you be resilient? How can you survive being cut off from supply chains? Should you have vertical farming? These are really important questions. We forget, sometimes we get so excited that we forget that the job of the government or of a city is to just provide at the minimum, at least the basics, right? Which is food, security, healthcare, education, connectivity. And that are the things that are most threatened in these things. So I think a new way is to be resilient by being hyper local. And then one can think about all of the other ways, and you can say then have digital connectivity so that you can be connected for digital work, and are not kind of lose your income, and obviously can also then reach out to other communities as well.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on how we can deal with, for example, pandemic through the concept of smart city? Because I believe, we could solve the pandemic problem much faster if we would have smart cities implemented as a concept.
I'm not 100% sure, because all these top smart city ranked cities in the world, they fail. New York, Barcelona, and I think that resilience is an important topic that we have been discussing about these in a very technical and academical level, but not implementing resilience in concept, right? So I think that we learned a lot from the pandemic, and probably having the possibility of rethinking our cities, we are going to deconstruct to them to build something different. I think that some bases or some concepts that the city was based 2,000 years ago that we still keep, these are, we didn't upgrade these along the time. And now with the war and the pandemic, we have this chance at least to discuss and to rebuild these fundamental concepts, So again, however, all these two events have been quite bad for the humanity. I think that we have a chance now to learn from these and to evolve,
Yeah, I agree with Renato. I think what we're talking about, I actually have a model for that. I don't know if I can share that. Should I just quickly share my screen? Because I think it'll be a diagram I'll try that and see if that's not too much. We'll see if it works, but maybe if it doesn't, then I'll just try and explain it. But, if you think about the model as Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you need to have your physiological needs, you need to have the security needs, and then everything else kind of peters out of that. So I'm going to not try and do this because Chrome is acting up. But I think if you go back to this kind of pyramid model, where if your basic kind of physiological needs are taken care of, then you start looking at other elements around reliability, usability, proficiency and creativity. And I think what happened in a lot of smart cities when we started this maker spaces, and everybody and their grandmother had an IoT kind of a smart citizen kit to try and look at the air quality, because every kind of city goes through that. You have your cycle paths, you have your citizen smart kits to kind of test the air quality. But the problem is all of these remain on a pilot level. They don't become business as usual. That's because the infrastructure layer that Renato was mentioning about, which is the health, the food, the electricity, the housing, the transport and connectivity, if that's not taken care of, and you don't have on top of that the employment, the security and the governance, and then the community and the social cohesion coming together, and that's when people feel like they can co-create and they can make stuff. So we end up having very extremes where people spend a lot of time in that maker kind of space, and a lot of time in the government centralized kind of providing the basics, but we don't have those in-between layers. So I think what we really need is a new kind of a model which takes those kind of human-centric elements that Ayesha was talking about, is this kind of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but finding a way when you're creating a technical stack, and this is where I'm putting my smart cities standards hat on, is that we seem to need to find a way to talk through that basic infrastructure layer with the kind of purpose that people want. So like, what is it that people want to get out of a city? When you move city and you're trying to find a job, you fall in love, you kind of do all this stuff as you do as your life stages. What is it you want to get out of it? And unfortunately, our cities, we don't really work with the citizens' life stage and their needs, because people move from cities into the countryside. People go back home to take care of their elderly parents. And all of that is seen in a person's life. But a city itself doesn't reflect how people's lives are changing. So I think what we need is a new kind of way of imagining this kind of stack, which is like almost a life stack. And that's where the traditional smart city model can really reflect going back to people's need, but environmental needs, because then we have a true smart city that's working with the people and working with the environment. I think that's the missing gap.
I think Nikki is back. Thank you so much, everyone, for such an incredible answers. I mean, I knew that the panel gonna be great when I saw the list of speakers, but I couldn't imagine that I would also learn so much useful information for myself, and to like that I will hear really strong ideas on how the concept of smart cities should be developed.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. That was some really interesting points and some great takeaways. In the audience, don't forget this session is recorded, so you can rewatch any of this and share it with your friends and everything to really understand that. Some great points looking at, the smart cities into the metaverse and how some of this blockchain technology might be used within that as well. Some very interesting concepts being thrown around to see what's going to come out of this mix at the end of the day. I'm excited to see where this all ends up, and I think we all are. So thanks, Renato, Aisha, Priya, and Tatiana for joining us for that. I really appreciate it. I know you've all got things you want to get off and do this evening and the rest of the day as well. So thank you ever so much for joining us. And with that, I think we shall say goodbye, and we'll let you get on. Don't forget at the end of the month, the 27th and 28th, Tech Circus has some other events going on, so keep an eye on your emails. And thank you, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to join us tonight.
Thank you so much,
everyone.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.